What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here today to talk about the state of Astrologian, the state of Dragoon, especially as it relates to the bigger changes that are coming to these jobs in 7.0, which is a minor change, or I guess a shift from their original schedule. So if you guys haven't seen, as a part of the digest, the official translation, Yoshi P said that they have delayed the Dragoon and Astrologian changes all the way to 7.0. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. I personally am actually pretty excited about that. Usually when you get mid-patch job adjustments, I don't expect too much. But now all of a sudden, I guess maybe in a negative, this could be doing that. But Chris, we've got some people to thank, right? Like today, we've been getting some insane support over on Twitch, blowing through a goal. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then let's jump into this topic.
So the first person is my camera went out midstream. So we put up one of my more recent YouTube videos of me voicing over coils. When I went through coils for my first time, we only got it started. They didn't get to see me cry. And then I drove to the store and got back with a camera, and then somebody dropped 10,000 bits anonymously, which more than covers my camera. So I want to say thanks to them for doing that. And then beyond that, just everybody renewing subs, Farmer Girl gifting subs to all the people in chat that would otherwise be seeing ads as Twitch explores how to get their platform paid for. There have been a lot more ads on Twitch in general.
Yeah.
In the last 6 months, and people like Farmer Girl, and this month, I think Farmer Girl and Cryptionics and Archivist have come in and just been. Archivist just dropped a ridiculous number in one go.
Huge shout out to the Orzian Archives, by the way, pushing for Twitch affiliate right now.
Yeah.
So if you guys aren't following them on Twitch, just be sure to follow their YouTube, and they'll all have all their links each and every which way. So thank you guys so much for that insane support. So
Archivist
also,
individually just shared. He just had a big windfall in his personal life and came over and shared a lot of that himself.
And just be sure to keep locked here. We're trying to make sure we have announcements for when Chris does this special stream as a part of hitting our Twitch goal over on Twitch, which is fantastic. So thank you guys. Subscribe and like this video if you guys like these discussions, and also check out Gaming Kind and Ginger Prime for more. But let's talk about the Astrologian and the Dragoon. For me, I'm gonna talk more about Astro, right? Because like I'm generally like I default into the kind of the healer role. Like my preference is healer, tank, and then essentially caster, and then essentially we're gonna maybe if you get lucky and like I will go into the melees. I just finished leveling Dragoon to 90 specifically. You already hit Omni 90. I'm coming up close, just knocking out Monk right now, and then I got the 3 physical ranged. We'll do Bard last just because why not? Yeah, suck it, Bard. But so overall, like
at least you're not a Bard. Right?
At least I'm not a Bard, right?
No matter
like,
what you're leveling, at least you're not a Bard.
If for anybody who's just really randomly does not get the meme, Bard's fine. My wife's the main Bard. We for some reason that became a meme from work to game, so we're just gonna embrace it. Anyway,
we were told we hated Bards, so I guess we do.
But Bard like isn't getting the work done. Dragoon and Astro seem to be. And Astro just also got a lot of work done because they went into the pure healer and the shielder kind of mental roles. But I honestly don't. I mean, I do feel it when I'm playing a shielding healer over a pure healer that Astro and White Mage bring. But I keep defaulting to White Mage. Like I get the card system, I get the changes to Astro, but I just continue to kind of go back into the White Mage. So what would you like to see? Like, because if they're going to focus in on what we'd be considering the rework like we've seen with Summoner and more, what would you like to see overall?
So I think at this point they were originally slating them for earlier, and then they ended up pushing. It sounds like they've kind of pushed that out to 7.0. This mimics the timeline of when Summoner got a set of changes going into 5.0, and they said back then, like media tour going into even, we hadn't even been Shadowbringers yet, and they're like, hey, just so you know, this isn't all of them. Like way out in front. You're coming over for dinner, and I call you and I'm like, hey, just so you know, I burned it. Like you're not even here, and I'm already telling you you're not going to be fully satisfied. And so they kicked some of that Summoner stuff out and said, like, we just aren't ready for the level of changes that need to be done. What I think jumps out to me as Endwalker coming is the second drop of changes to Summoner is not just how they play in endgame. I'm a warrior main, and so it doesn't really affect me how they play in endgame that much. And so like I'm not the right person to discuss that. You and I don't do a lot of Savage and Ultimate content, so if they're a little bit off of balance, like I love Machinist because I do a lot of open world solo content. That burstiness is amazing. Some people say like, oh, Machinist is underpowered in this content. I'm liking Machinist. I'm loving it. It's a blast to go do like your solo hunts with. It's an absolute, just imagine Warrior with a gun and Peloton. Like, it's awesome. You're just flame throwing things, just stuff just melts. It's amazing. So when I look at what I would like to see, the biggest thing for me that can come from a change that's delayed to an expansion is what happens when I'm in synced content. The reason when I queue for synced content, I don't really want to queue outside of a handful of jobs, because I don't like the way Black Mage plays low at all. And like Gunbreaker's super powerful. I don't enjoy getting Copper Bell on a Gunbreaker. I don't know why. It just doesn't feel Gunbreaker.
I'll echo that 100% in terms of like Dragoon. I was on a Dragoon and then I was like, oh, I actually have no AoE. Like,
so like 42.
And I was like, this is
Azamel and
right. So obviously, like, the simplicity side of it is that when we start to look at skills and scaling, but I would think that might be more applied to all the jobs as a whole, right? More upgraded skills so that like it feels, you know, unique and interesting. Or essentially what we were kind of talking about pre-Endwalker with bringing in syncing in terms of like, you got your skills, just cut the potency, like just cut the potency down, and people are like, oh, that make it too overpowered. I'm like, well, clearly you haven't run dungeons since an expansion came out, because everything melts anyway. I'm just asking for being able to practice my rotations. But what do you think?
I think that Monk and Summoner are a lot more fun to get tossed down into Cutter's Cry than Black Mage. And maybe that's just my personal opinion, but like under the assumption that the game is always going to be more basic, back sub level 50. It was never a max level. So it was never a complete kit. I would way rather play it. And so I think there are just some jobs that really struggle. And I think honestly, if they're going to be updating, if they're going to say like, hey, yeah, maybe we'll go back and touch a handful of things as the battle system updates, but there's going to be a few jobs that get overhauled, I'd love to see them jump it up to 3. So for me, I would say the 3 that need it the most to have like a cohesive, I love running my leveling roulette, and I feel like it's the same job across the bar, I think that Astro makes sense. The card system across the way just kind of needs to be re-envisioned to be a more cohesive thing and feel natural. Dragoon, you know, at the very least, helping it feel like it does more in that like Stone Vigil and below. But just feeling like it has more use, I think that's great. Especially because like it shares gear with Reaper, and like at least from what I'd see, people generally like Reaper. And so having 2 jobs Reaper tied to the same gear that people like both, that's pretty cool. That you could have a gear set that has 2 really fun play styles. But I would add a 3rd in there. And so I don't know what that 3rd would be. You know, I mean, we're work to game, so it's probably Bard.
I would say though, on that note, that like, imagine if they ended up doing 3 real overhauls like they did with Summoner. Would that then constitute we get 1 new job, and then we're going to overhaul a lot of these old jobs, because it's still a lot of work. Like Summoner became a new job, and yes, some of the assets are already there, but overall, like, that was like a whole re-envision. You're talking quests, you're talking about some of the stuff in the early game that have to change. I want to come back to that because I've seen some people in chat talk about a few things, what we've already talked about. First, that it's even hinted that Black Mage might get an overhaul come 7.0. I love how Black Mage plays though. Like every time I play Black Mage, I cackle because I'm just having too much fun. But it is, you know, something that the core problem I don't think is the game is at 90. I think essentially what I've talked about multiple times, that you start to see these bigger gaps where they used not to be. Like everything used to be made much more condensed. We saw a condensing of the stats and everything like that already. And so I'm wondering if we start to see some kind of like, okay, let's look at what does it look like to have a level 100 job, or, you know, like the thing that might give me a little bit of anxiety, I'm sure it would be fine. But if they end up saying, hey, we're taking everything to level 60 or something like that, where it's like we're condensing the levels down so that, you know, and then reworking scaling and things like that, that would be very dramatic. And at the same time, you know, they talk about a 10-year plan, and, you know, we haven't heard about that. But the other thing is that people talking about how the ultimates that, you know, doing the scaling, like we've kind of theorized that we might see at some point, could impact the ultimates. And it could, like, it could impact the ultimates. It could also be perfectly just fine. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that anything's off the table right now, especially when I'm spending theoretical Square Enix money. Yeah, it's like, I'm just talking about it. Yeah.
I mean, I think the ultimates need to always remain synced. to try to protect them, but you can't then extend that to, okay, and then they also have to be this anchor that holds down the future of the game. So I think there's a big gap between, well, just let me run it unsynced and get the glamour weapon instantly for free. There's a big gap between that and we're keeping it synced, we'll protect it as best we can, but like it's going to change. And it does every time new jobs are added and every time that abilities change. So like it has changed UCOB then, and you hear like when somebody completes UCOB for the very first time, the community overwhelmingly is like, yeah, that's amazing. But when you hear like people who are ultimate veterans who have grinded these things a million times, they talk about like, oh, well, I cleared UCOB when it was on patch versus I cleared UCOB later, because there is a distinction there, even though the game doesn't make it.
I think the scaling system in 14 is still a little strange because some of the like extra stats don't actually scale. So it's like there is,
which is why there's like Abyss for things like that.
Yeah.
People have tried to optimize for how that syncing system works with you, to make sure their substats are carrying in. So I think that originally I would say let's move to 2 jobs, a limited job, and rebalance 3 jobs, because that really sets the tone for 7.0 being spare no expense. And that gives the ability in 8.0 to pull back. In 8.0, I think we drop to 1 job, finish up the rebalances, or like and make a big stab at them, knock out like 3 or 4 of them, and only do 1 new job. But I think that tells me 10-year plan, because when we look at that 10-year plan that was given, it wasn't a 10-year plan.
Right.
People keep referring it to as one, but like the dates on that thing, that 10-year plan was like, here's everything we're gonna do through lunch. Well, what are we doing for dinner? Like, I mean, it was so fast. It was wildly front loaded.
Yeah.
They're like, and here's everything I'm gonna do in the next 2 years. Okay, but you said 10. Like, where's the other 8?
Yeah.
So I think that really sends the message, but I don't think we'll get that. It's just like if I'm spending Square Enix invisible dollars infinitely, truly spare no expense, run this thing into the ground financially, then yeah, just go nuts. I don't think in reality that happens. But for Dragoon and Astro, I would love to see the card system revisited. It feels somehow clumsy to me, and I think most of it for me is UI. I think most of it is that the job feels like it's trying to do something different than other jobs, but it's giving me the same visual tools. And so then when I'm doing it poorly, like I run out of mana because I haven't played it in a while. I'm in a sync dungeon. I'm like, why am I out of mana? Oh, because you haven't applied a card in 9 years.
Right.
Oh, that's my fault.
If you're doing the card system, like mana is not a problem. But when we sat down at the media tour, when we were playing with Zumi, when we were all and Curious Joy, when we were all having this time, you all 3 were like, oh man, Astro, like I like what they've done, and I'm like, guys, this is a problem. Like there is serious problem with Astro, and it's like they're like, what? I was like, yeah, like there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to exist on this job. It just needs to have some skills that smart upgrade, right? Because you've got draw, undraw, redraw, da. And I was like, okay, like if those things are to be taken seriously, like you really, like all of a sudden I'm like, I literally have to rethink a lot of this. I put a lot of work into my like Astro guide. I'm very pleased with it. I promised I'd put a lot of time into it. I'm happy how it turned out. But I was like, yeah, like there's just a lot of stuff. I'm like, why is this 3 buttons? You know, like that's the same kind of concept I've seen with a couple of the other jobs. And Summoner really did condense it down. I felt like Summoner in Shadowbringers was so floated. I was like, I gotta go here and I gotta go here. And I'm like, if they just take this 1 button and turn it in, like just have it flip based off of what, like this or this mode, like it saves me like all of the stress. And so they ended up like completely overhauling it. Now, for Dragoon, if you guys are still listening and if you guys are watching us live, sound off with like Final Fantasy XI Vet here, because I would absolutely freaking adore the Dragoon to have a pet wyvern. Like I think everybody who's come over from 11 and looked at this job has dreamed of that. So if we're sitting here just balls to the wall, putting it all out there, if they're going to rework Dragoon, I think narratively with how the story's evolved, now would be a perfect time to introduce that pet as not necessarily a pet, because we know Yoshi P and his stance on pet jobs, but just to have it visual aesthetic. Sure, it's just a part of your auto attack, but how freaking cool would that be to just bring it back? And yes, you wouldn't be giving your pet like ultimately commands, but it would just be something that I think would be very aesthetically pleasing and very thematic for how Dragoon and the story of Final Fantasy XIV has evolved.
Like Machinist?
Yeah, like a Machinist. Or maybe, yeah, where it's like you maybe do like certain rotation and then you get to bring out like a pet, like your pet comes out for a little bit to kind of, almost like where you look at the Dark Knight with Faye, like all of a sudden you got like, like where you kind of have these moments you build up to, so it's not necessarily out all the time, but it would still be cool. Like the same kind of thing. Like the one frustration I have with Summoner is that Carby just is there. They're not doing anything. They have 2 skills that you can use. There's no auto attack for Carby, and I was like, that would be so cool to see that brought in. And then and if they decide to keep the Dragoon pet like out there, that'd be really, really cool, in my mind.
I mean, it would have to be mechanically different than being a melee summoner,
yeah,
and yet it can't be so distinct that it's Reaper, who it literally shares gear with.
Yeah.
So like, if it is going to summon a dragon, there is a question of like, how does it do that in a way that is different than Machinist, Summoner, and Reaper, who are all already kind of bringing something into being to help kind of visually increase their impact. There is something cool to that. And so I don't know, like I would love to see jobs move to, I would love a job that felt like it was more solo limit breaking. Like, do you remember old
yes,
fighting games? I know you play a lot more fighting games than me.
Yeah.
So like when you're seeing the like combo, and you're seeing that number tick up, and you're like, how many can I combo? Like the ability to kind of like build it up. And the better you are at building up, the faster it builds.
Yeah.
And then kind of drop that dragon and having like a 1, 2, and 3 level dragon.
Well, that then just wonders to see, like, would we ever see personalized limit breaks brought in to the individual as opposed to the party? Because, like I was gonna say, the thing that I like about the PvP, like Dragoon and PvP, feels so cool, especially when you're able to use your jump as a limit break and then bringing it down and bringing out such devastation, and so like that in and of itself is like, oh man, I really love how they designed out the PvP side of things, and it shows to me, not that I like we want to make it all in sync with on the PvE side, but it shows to me that even with limited skills, these skills are smart, they upgrade, they change based off of what you're doing. You can have a lot of complexity and you don't have to have endless skills in and of itself. But like Dragoon and PvP, like how cool would it be to have your jump in a way done like that, as opposed to the current, like, who knows, like anything's on the table here in that regards. But yeah,
I mean, I'm excited about what it could do in PvP. I will say, like PvE, there are like other checks, right? And so having movement in PvP, having something that like drastically increases everybody's movement, becomes really powerful really fast in PvP. So you have to be really careful with where you put those abilities if you put them in on a particular job. But in PvE, you can have kind of wide scale movement covering abilities, because movement covering is an element of kind of PvE encounter design. And so same with like self heals. In PvP, you have to be really careful how you add that in a very balanced way. And so they basically put this kind of universal healing method in, as opposed to in PvE, having everybody have different barriers, having buffs, having utility. Those are all things. Buff stacking in PvP gets really outlandishly. It takes away if you allow buff stacking in PvP, some games do, some games don't. What that tends to do is that tends to let the winning team just steamroll the other team. And then that means that every match you're either kicking somebody's teeth in, laughing maniacally, or having your teeth kicked in and crying. And like those close matches, are the nail biters are really fun, and buff stacking can be a mechanic that makes that really hard. Once somebody, so like I think that PvE, you can stack those things, and you can have a big robust kit, and then have the problems that you have to solve. Hey, I gave you way more tools in your toolbox, but then you have to solve Dragon Song Ultimate. So it's like, yeah, I gave you access to power tools, but like now you have to build me a whole house. And like, so it's a huge ask. As opposed to in PvP, you don't really want Dragon Song Ultimate to be the bar for your most talented players. So you want that to be more in like reaction time and more action based, and more like how do the jobs interact against each other. So like the PvP actions are really fun and they show personality. I don't ever want PvE to be PvP. I just want it to say, I like how well that system works for that content. I want my system to work that well for my content.
Yeah. I would like that a lot. There's a lot of, I think, potential here. I think the fact that they're talking about moving it into the expansion shows how like much they're willing to put in and do the work. And I think that has me excited to cover like, the expansion in terms of these jobs, because that outside of whatever new jobs we get, whether it's 1 or 2, in that regards. And then also, like, again, if they're talking about doing like Black Mage at some point, here's the thought, like for my final thought before we go to you, is that if they continue to list off like, oh, we're gonna really do something different with 7.0, like at some point, like, are we talking about a big overhaul for 7.0, one that we haven't seen yet, that a lot of the work they've already done kind of leads into it? Because if all of a sudden it's like, guys, we're, holy crap, big changes are coming down the pipe, who knows? Because from a story and a narrative perspective, we know we're starting a whole new saga ish perhaps, but when it comes down to the graphic overhaul, all the numbers overhaul that's already occurred, like, we've got the world visit system in place, like, like when it comes down to the next 10 years and it's spare no expense, like if chat keeps listing off jobs of what they're talking about doing a lot of work for, it's like, is Yoshi P really saying that they're just overhauling the combat system? That's something I'm going to be watching for very closely. What do you think, Chris?
I think that the total amount of content we get per patch is very large. 6.2 is going to be an enormous patch. I don't expect 6.3 to be any slacker. So we're already getting a lot. I think the strength of this game comes from consistent iteration, which means you don't totally overhaul the system. I think that in chat today we've been talking about World of Warcraft, and as I'm starting to look more in the history of these games and like how they got here, it starts to become a little more obvious when watching the game film of how World of Warcraft gets themselves in trouble, because they put a system in place and then they get a lot of feedback around that system. They say they're going to listen to that feedback, and then they drastically overhaul it and then come out with a new system, which means they never really get to build on, you gave me feedback, I swung left, you gave me more feedback, I swung right, and then just totally settling into this place where we can be really happy for a while. So I kind of hope they would never do a drastic all-in-one overhaul. What I hope for more is 6.2 is huge, 6.3 is huge, 6.4. I'd rather them just like repeatedly hit us with what feels big than having one giant grandiose curtain reveal moment, because if that curtain reveal moment is even 10% miss the mark, and they touched every single system in the game, that 10% could delete whole player's way of playing by accident. And so I would rather them say, let's do a little bit, keep giving us feedback, and that way if somebody's deleted, it's probably because they live on the outskirts and they get deleted slowly in their way of playing, which gives them a chance to find one of these new ways, because in theory we're not just deleting content. In theory it's saying, hey, we've got some cons, but we've got a lot of pros. And so that gives that person a chance to say, wow, the way I play 14 is really changing, but it's changing over a year, it's changing over 3 years, not, hey, starting next Tuesday, the way you've been logging in every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday and hanging out with your friends is bad. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that moment. So I think if Dragoon and Astro is the big change going into next expansion, that's great. Let's focus on those. And then maybe in 8.0, we touch 2 more jobs or 3 more jobs.
And and that's it for the topic here, guys. Let us know what you think. Right now, chat's going a little bit nuts. Thank you for Mayor Brud. Thank you, Chili, for the gift. Thank you, Diz, for that tier 1 sub. I'm missing a couple. I apologize. Thunder Bunnies. And then welcome JP Wormwood to the channel. Thanks for stopping by and saying hi. So guys, if you want to jump in with us on these live discussions and weigh in on the topics at hand, be sure to go check out the link for Twitch, where Chris is live Monday through Thursday, and then I kind of jump in on Fridays, sometimes the weekends. We have a lot of fun, a lot of good topics being had, a lot of gameplay, and there's going to be more to come, especially with Data Center Visit. I know we've been having community game nights led by the community, so be sure to check out the Discord as well. Chris, why don't you take us out, dude?
Guys, I'm working on scheduling a bonus stream to say thank you for all this amazing support. And so we'll do something fun with that. So keep it here. Stay all the way to the end of these videos, or come hang out on Twitch if you want to know when that is, or follow us over on Twitter. I heard today that what's the difference between Delmonte B and Ginger Prime? That Delmonte B guy seems to know what's going on with Ginger Prime pretty well. It's pretty in tune. And so go follow us over there.
Delmonte, like the banana with a Y.
So thank you guys. And we'll keep chatting about all this fun stuff coming in 14. Great time to be a 14 player. Great time to be a gamer. We'll see you next time.
Take care.